details. Iran deal hopes rise after Trump cancels planned strikes. US President Donald Trump says he has cancelled planned strikes against Iran and expects what he called a great settlement to end the US-Israeli war on Iran. Trump said a deal could be signed in Europe as soon as this weekend, but Tehran has not confirmed that any agreement has been finalized. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Ismail Bekai said Tehran would not compromise on its red lines and described reports about the timing and venue of a signing ceremony as speculative. Trump's announcement came only hours after he threatened fresh attacks on Iran and spoke of taking control of Karg Island and other oil infrastructure. He later said discussions had reached Iran's highest leadership and that planned strikes for Thursday evening had been cancelled. The US President also said a naval blockade would remain in force until what he described as a transaction was finalized. The remarks add another layer of uncertainty to a conflict that has already disrupted regional security, energy markets and maritime traffic in the Gulf. Talks between Washington and Tehran have been continuing since the April ceasefire mediated by Pakistan. Discussions are aimed at permanently ending the war that began on February 28, reopening the Strait of Hormuz and reaching a settlement on Iran's nuclear program. Iranian officials, however, have warned that the war will continue unless the United States respects Iran's interests. Tehran has also said it will respond more severely to any future American attack. Hormuz closure deepens pressure on global shipping. Iran says it has once again closed the Strait of Hormuz following U.S. strikes in the country's suit and intensified exchange of fire on June 10th and 11th. Iranian officials said the waterway would remain closed to all maritime traffic, including commercial vessels and oil tankers, until further notice. More than 3,200 vessels are reported to have been stranded near the strategic passage. Tehran has warned that any vessel attempting to transit the strait will be considered a target. The warning has raised fears of further escalation in one of the world's most important maritime corridors. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical route for global oil and gas shipments. A prolonged closure could sharply increase pressure on energy prices, disrupt supply chains, and raise transport costs across several regions. Closure comes as Iran and the United States remain locked in a dangerous cycle of strikes and counter-strikes. It also complicates ongoing diplomatic efforts to reach a broader agreement to end the war and restore freedom of navigation in the Gulf. Shipping companies, energy traders and governments are now watching the situation closely, with any military incident in the strait carrying the risk of a wider regional confrontation. Israeli fire wounds Palestinians in Gaza despite ceasefire. 3 Palestinians, including a woman, have been wounded by Israeli fire in Gaza, while Israeli forces demolished a Palestinian home under construction in the occupied West Bank. A medical source said a seriously injured woman was taken to Shifa Hospital after Israeli gunfire in the Atatra area west of Beit Laiha. 2 other people were wounded after an Israeli drone exploded near civilians in Gaza's Zaytun neighborhood. Local sources said Israeli artillery also shelled areas of Khan Yunis, while Israeli warships fired on the city's western coast. The incident adds to repeated reports of Israeli attacks in Gaza, despite the ceasefire that came into effect on October 10, 2025. Gaza has since said at least 981 Palestinians have been killed and 3,104 injured by Israeli army fire since the ceasefire began. Palestinian officials and local sources say Israeli violations have continued across several parts of the enclave. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces also demolished a Palestinian home that was still under construction. Such demolitions are regularly condemned by Palestinians as part of Israel's broader policy of displacement and settlement expansion. The latest violence comes as humanitarian conditions in Gaza remain severe, with displaced families, damaged infrastructure, and restricted access to basic services. continuing to affect large parts of the population.
The news continues on the English language broadcast of the Voice of Turkey.
Washington prepares to reduce NATO air